Whenever the user is touching an object, the computer will know that the user is touching that object, and the computer will speak information regarding that object. So this way, a visually challenged student can learn from maps and diagrams on his own. Uh, while I worked on this technology from 2006 to 2010, I realized over the course of 4 years that what I'm basically doing is helping this kid, Monuram, learn by himself. And there are not many resources available to Monuram so that he can learn on his own. The resources that are available currently are mostly Braille books, which is made out of costly paper. Braille, as you know, is a system of raised dots, which the user can then swipe over and learn. What happens is once you swipe too many times, these Braille dots get depressed, and therefore errors creep in the textbooks. So what the school typically does is publish these textbooks every year, and that also is expensive to the school. The other resource which I found was audiobooks that were available to them. These audiobooks were generally recordings of the technique of the material that they have. So, and their material is basically taken out of the books, which is available to the masses. So therefore, these audiobooks were just like normal recording of the material and not something which was specially created for them. And most of these audiobooks were done by volunteers, and mostly to get more audiobooks out, many volunteers just read the sentences out of the textbook. And we saw that the engagement levels with these audio materials were ranging somewhere around 15%. They were not really high. I realized that the visually challenged students, they have a different learning mechanism from our own. And basically that's kind of more like a serial processing learning. Like they learn concepts from one step to the second step to another one, whereas we, on the other hand, can see multiple things and make sense of it. But in our research, we try to understand why is this so. So visually challenged, they cannot see; they can only either hear or they can touch and feel. And even when they touch, they generally touch from one place to the other. So therefore, they go from one point to the other, or they hear one thing and then the next thing. Like it's really hard to hear two people talking at the same time. So basically, you go from one step to the other, and that's how you learn if you're a blind child. Whereas for us, we can see multiple things and make sense of it. So because of this difference in learning mechanism, I realized that the current audio material was not really suited for their needs, since it was just a bland reading of text. So we went out. I formed a group of my 5 high school friends, asked them a favor, took them out for a lot of coffees and dinner, and then we went out, sitting in the classrooms, understanding what content they taught, what content they understood, and why. We created some parameters and some basic understanding. And what we found that in this case, the content needs to be really, really short and clear. The second thing that we found is that the pace when you're delivering these audiobooks needs to be really slow so that they have time to listen and absorb the material because they cannot visualize it. The third thing that we found is many of these students, they lack the English fluency skill set. They generally converse in their mother tongue, and because they stay in such a closed group within their own um, hostels, they generally don't interact with outside communities. Therefore, they communicate in the language which is their native language. And we realized this was also a big deterrent to explore other resources available to them as well as for their employment later on. So this made us think that we really need to structure our content bilingual in nature. Uh, Given these parameters of having bilingual, which contains their native language and English language, plus really slow, plus also the content being very clear and short, typically from 4 minutes to 7 minutes of in length. We created these content and then we went around testing them with visually challenged. Our methodology for testing was that once we created a content, for example, for a fifth grader, We tested the content with a seventh grader and an eighth grader. So we asked the eighth grade blind student to give us feedback about the content and the audio lectures for these um, content for the fifth grader. Doing that, it helped us realize that uh, it really refined our content. That was the first thing that we got. It really helped us understand what parts of the lecture or the audio resource they could really grasp and what parts we needed refinement. Many a time we got the suggestion from the student themselves giving us feedback that maybe if you say it in this way, this is how it would really be better. So overall, I would say that even when we were doing a feedback, we not only did a feedback in terms of some numerical value or statistical value, such as words per minute, sort of a thing. We also did kind of feedback which was qualitative in nature, and this feedback was collected from having conversations with them. That was a key learning point: is to really indulge in these conversations and to also understand what are the things that they're really trying to say. Because many a time these students also lack communication skill set. So it was sometimes difficult for them to express what they're trying to say. What really helped us was like sitting along with them, studying in the classes, understanding how they express different things, helped us understand what their feedback to us was. Mm. The other thing that we found while engaging with the school is that many of these kids they already use this simple Nokia handset. It was this like Nokia 2255 where you could just text, uh, not tweet, text at that time, and they use it primarily for two purposes. One is they have their emergency contact and speed dial that they use to dial in or talk to their parents or talk to their guardians if they need something, and the second is to listen to songs. They really like songs. So we realized, like when we're carrying out the delivery mechanism, that our audio resources should be like songs in some similar way. Like it should need to be of like 47 minutes of length. And that's when we cut down our content, which was around 15 minutes or 20 minutes of in length, to really some short pieces, which was like 4 to 5 minutes. Um, this really made our resource that they could access it from the mobile phone anywhere, anytime. And the second thing was this actually bumped up our engagement levels. So with our 15 minutes resources, we were able to achieve around 50 or 60% engagement levels. With these 4 to 7 minutes of the lectures, where we just picked one particular concept, we didn't talk about 10 concepts, we talked about only one. So even their one single chapter was divided into a series of like 3 to 5 to 7 concepts, depending on the structured content. But then once we did this, we found up to 95 to 98% engagement levels with the resources. So that was like really, really eye opener.
How sorry, how are you measuring engagement levels?
So one thing we measure the engagement level is once we have distributed this audio series, typically how we do is distribute the audio through teachers so that they have some more credibility, and teachers they give it out to the students. Number one, have them listen to it. So after a month, let's say we would follow up and we would have you listen to this particular lecture because we release it time based, so we could measure that. Number two, do you remember the concept? So if they could recollect the concept, that didn't factor in to calculate engagement level, but most of the kids ended up remembering the concept. And one hard proof of that is that they started studying from our resources instead of referring to real textbooks. They completely switched over. Um, in fact, last year, the matriculating class used only our audio resources to give the exams. And on average, the test scores went up by 21%. So we connected it with, given that we are the only one, our audio resources are the ones which they are using. So we figured that's how engagement levels really went up, and really also the test scores went up. These are some of the pictures. This is how, like, when we are conducting the test, we made them listen so that they could really focus on the lectures. They have a computer lab, so we use their lab for that. The next thing that we think about is uh, now that we were successful in doing this, we thought about in future where it will go. So we believe that Android platform will be the de facto platform, so, especially for reaching out to communities in emerging economies or developing areas. Um, this is also due to the fact that many of these kids come from low income families, uh, typically in these schools, which are boarding schools, and they don't have access to really high tech or expensive devices. Android as a platform is really cheap, and there are many phones available which could be really cheap. So we see Android platform as coming up in the next 5 years, reaching out to this market. Um, Therefore, we started thinking about how do we restructure our already available audio library into an Android app. So this is just a very beta version of it. It's it's very simple, but it's indexable, searchable. We are also transcribing our audio lectures, and so that a person can just talk into the app, search through keywords, and from a transcript we can pull out the relevant audio lectures. Um, so we are making this app voice enabled. Um, Obviously, we are doing research on that. So how do we make this app really voice enabled? And as you can see, our audio resources, they have different languages like Punjabi, English, um, different Indian languages, but all these languages are bilingual. All our resources have been bilingual. They have Punjabi and English, Tamil and English, and so on and so forth. So that was a beta test that we did, and children really liked the app. So what we thought is that we need to build a vision around this, and not just a simple app that is just an indexable, searchable audio library, but what's our vision around an Android app? So we thought that we want to build an Android app, which is the de facto app for universal access learning. On this universal access learning platform, a student who is deaf, a student who is blind, a student who is physically challenged, or even a normal child can learn easily. Um, with this app, our vision is that it can be either accessible through text or the typing or keyboard, or it is accessible through also talking. This app will contain our resources, which are audio. This app will also contain content which we are developing for the deaf. Like for the deaf student community, we are building visualization based content and animations since they primarily learn from the visual material and they have a very different learning style. So that visualization will also be acted on it, integrated with it, along with the content of the audio. We are also planning to keep other interactive resources available through the app, and therefore we think that this app would be the de facto app for universal access learning through mobile phone. Overall, in this, sorry about the text, but this is kind of a wrap up about what impact we have achieved. We have over 200 audio resources across different material, which is post content. It also has stories. It has a searchable audio dictionary that we really want to integrate with an app. Um, we have about our resources have been distributed to over 300 students in the last 3 years at Institute for the Blind. Typically, in each section, they have around 15 to 30 students. So that's their class size. Over 60 volunteers have worked to develop these audio resources, and these volunteers have worked to build the content, record the content, test out, re-record, test, re-record, and so on until we think it's really perfect for them. They're compatible with their own Nokia phones, and visually challenged can learn from anywhere, anytime. We believe that, and in fact, we have good evidence for it, that with these kind of more self-learning resources, the visually challenged community can become, students can feel more empowered in themselves, since now the learning process is not just instruction based and dependent on teacher, but they can explore resources and learn on their own. This helps us build the self confidence of the child, so the child can learn on his own, explore the world, understand on his own. The second impact that we're achieving is the English language fluency. With this, once they're more conversant with the English language, more number of job opportunities are available to them, especially in the BPO or customer care sector. Um, the third impact that we're having is definitely in better concept understanding and recall. So overall, with that, I would like to thank you all for being here. Thanks for listening to it. If there's one key takeaway that I would like you to go away with, it would be that from my journey, what I really learned is that sometimes when you're thinking about the end user tends not to have different needs from you, but also could have different ways in which how the end user wants the solution to be. We generally, I mean, in today's lot of lectures, like especially at Sloan, we see that we have become very good at identifying the need. Like we can identify the end user need as this or that, and we create our own solutions to fit that need. But we don't really take the time and energy and resources to go out, step in the shoes of the end user, understand how they will perceive the solution that we're designing for them, and then design around it. So that is the one key takeaway that we need to take our time while designing and having the end user together involved in the design as well. Thank you. With that, I open up to questions about anything, whether this particular thing or any other experience that you wanted to share with my funding this.
Okay, so let me answer this question. So you're talking about that you on design and keeping users in mind. So are you looking at human-centered design, or I mean, is that the concept you're trying to explore?
Yes, I think that concept we don't learn that something like that. Right? Yeah. So that's the human centered design that we are typically doing, and that's when I realized it. It's that we have like sat in the classrooms of these differently able children. We saw how they learn. We mapped out the learning process, and then we developed content for that. And then we also tested this content out with other students who would give us relevant feedback. Um, so it was definitely due to, I would say, integrating with the end user. We also had talks with the teachers. Typically, we try to understand from teachers like what concepts they find it really hard to understand, and how do you currently explain it. So, for example, if you're teaching graphs, you're teaching a simple line, equation of a line in algebra, and then you actually drop algebra or geometry. Then we ask the teacher like, how do you teach it? So they generally teach it. They have these tactile based, like you can cut it from cardboard or something like that, and you can explain so that they can touch and feel and see and understand. But they also have some geometric instruments which are labeled in braille. But and then we thought about okay, how can we integrate all these learning so the teachers already have while developing our resources. So it was not just the students, but also the teachers that we also got. So that is.
How do you go about thinking using available solutions versus exploring new ones? Because when a particular problem was posed to you, you would have gone in the direction of mix of both. It kind of depends on individually how fast you want to roll out, how speed that strategy.
Yes. So we were very particular about it, that we want to focus on self-learning. So there were already very good classroom resources which have been developed by teachers. But generally, what happens with the classroom resources is that the teacher needs to be present and needs to explain it. In India, in developing economies, there are not many resources which are focused on self-learning, as currently education in these schools, the state of education in these schools is that most of these schools is non-profit. They are underfunded usually, as is the case. And then they're also, most of the teachers come from very low income status. So they are very focused on retaining their job and making sure that they're following the syllabus, methodology, resources which are prescribed from the government agencies. And what happens in that case is that there's less focus there on the impact on kids, on other parameters development, such as self confidence. There's more impact on focus on getting the test results. And because of that, many of these learning resources So the self-learning resources that were there for at least for the visually challenged, which were relevant to our solution, were audiobooks, and the audiobooks had I mentioned in the start before they had like 10 to 15% of the engagement. It was basically due to someone just simply sitting and recording, but not thinking about how they found the structure. However, to your point, I agree totally that there are resources available that should also be distributed across. Um, for that, I think we need to go about creating more of a partnership model with nonprofits from across the world, which are creating these different resources. So, an example of that is actually we have registered with the United Nations Online Volunteering, and we got a sexual education volunteer from Guatemala, and she's Dominica, and she did her online webinar series on learning. So she shared how she constructed some of the resources with simple cartoon material um, online. So I think that more kind of such awareness needs to be done so that people can even construct these resources with very simple tools by themselves, which are for playful things or learning or anything else. So there's a lot of, I would say, for that particular purpose, there's a lot of communication that needs to be addressed. So currently we are six on management team. We have two advisors, and we have around 30 plus volunteers across the world.
With the students you worked with, how did you manage accountability? Did you monitor every time they sat down and used the materials, or can you measure kind of how much of it was them choosing to use on their own, and how much was it?
Yeah, we didn't. We thought that the best way to measure engagement is to think about how they choose on their own. Of course, I would say that some of these results could be biased because once we go and we talk to them and we test it out with them for the lower grades, they know that such resources are there. But typically, how we went about distributing is that the teacher makes an announcement, hands out like this is available if you want to take and collect and load it. So they help out in doing it, and it's often choice. That's one way where we got the option. Um, Typically, everyone uses it. That's what it is. For some subjects, once we find like, oh, this resource is not being much used, or this was not. The one thing which I would say is reuse, in the sense like when the next class comes in and tries to use, whether students sign up for the same thing or not. I think that's getting us to know feedback over a year that whether it is really helpful or not. Because if they don't sign up again, it means it's not. So we need to reevaluate on them. And for one or two subjects we found it at a particular grade, but that one or two lectures especially. So other thing is like many times they will cover all the lectures, but they will not listen to all of them. So one thing is to simply ask them, okay, this module, how many lectures do they listen to? Roughly give us an idea. So if you know that they're way off, like if you know there are 10 lectures, but it's like, oh, there are like five, we know that they're not comfortable or something. If somehow something goes wrong, and then we strike a further conversation with these kids as to what's happening. So it's very qualitative as well. I would say the feedback is very taken very qualitative way because sometimes each kid can also have his or her own need, and that is something which has really been better towards a good person. The other thing which I would find is when we also partnered with some of the schools, we found their needs to be very different from the initial school we partnered with, simply because there would be some teachers which are good at one school and some teachers which are good at other schools. So sometimes needs also vary based on teachers and the resources available as well. So this one problem with scaling this correctly is this needs is really all right, with that, thank you all for being here. I look forward to talking to you one on one if you want to. Please have coffee and donuts.